In an ideal world, forgiveness and redemption would be paths open to everyone without exception. However, reality teaches us that certain actions and behaviors cut so deep that granting a second chance might not only fail to repair the damage, but could potentially allow more suffering. In this article, we'll discuss the limits of forgiveness and the importance of protecting our emotional and physical well-being. We'll also aim to teach you to have open eyes and a cautious heart, to identify situations where it's wiser to move forward, armed with the lessons learned, rather than reopening the door to the possibility of more pain. While we should aspire to compassion and understanding, it's also crucial to acknowledge the reality of someone's actions and their inherent consequences. Thus, Stoicism encourages us to look beyond our hopes and desires to see the situation as it truly is. Giving a second chance implies hope and belief in the other's capacity for change. However, the Stoics remind us that we must anchor our decisions in reason and objective reality, not unfounded optimism. This means assessing whether someone's past actions reflect a pattern of behavior unlikely to change, and considering whether granting a second chance could harm us or perpetuate negative cycles. In this discussion, we will cover 12 important topics for you to evaluate before giving someone a second chance. Pay attention, as all the topics discussed here are important. Stay focused until the end, and if possible, leave your likes and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot and costs you nothing. Let's dive in. 1. People rarely change. Changing deeply ingrained behaviors or character traits requires not just recognition and the will to change, but also sustained effort and often professional assistance. This change process is intricate, difficult, and above all, rare. Often people fall into the same patterns, not because they consciously choose to, but because those patterns are comfortable and familiar, even if they are harmful to themselves or others. Moreover, change requires a conducive environment and a support system. Without these fundamental elements, even those with the greatest determination may find themselves struggling against the current, unable to make significant progress. This doesn't mean change is impossible, but the likelihood of radical character or behavior transformations, especially without intrinsic motivation and adequate external support, is low. Giving a second chance in the hope of change can therefore be a risky gamble. Depending on the severity of someone's actions or behavior, one might be unwittingly exposing oneself to repeated risks without a realistic likelihood of improvement. In cases of abuse, deep betrayal, or other harmful actions, the hope of change might be more a reflection of the giver's desire than a tangible possibility based on the person in question. Recognizing that people rarely change is not an excuse to give up on everyone at the first sign of imperfection, but an invitation to realistically assess situations and protect one's emotional and physical well-being. It means understanding that while support and encouragement are valuable, the responsibility for change ultimately lies with the person who needs to change. This realization can be liberating, allowing one to move forward with clarity and purpose, focusing on relationships and situations that promote mutual growth and respect. 2. Never compromise your values. When faced with the decision to give or not give a second chance to someone, it's essential to reflect on how this choice aligns with our deepest values. One of the fundamental lessons we can draw, especially when considering Stoic philosophy, is the importance of never compromising our values, regardless of the circumstances. Virtue and integrity are supreme goods that should be maintained above all else. Thus, we must live in congruence with our rational and virtuous nature, which includes acting and making decisions that are in harmony with our ethical and moral principles. When considering giving a second chance to someone, therefore, we must question whether this action is in line with our core values or would lead us to compromise them. Compromising our values for someone who has demonstrated they do not deserve a second chance not only deviates us from the path of virtue, but can also lead to a cycle of disappointments and grievances. This occurs because, by ignoring the past actions of the person and the lessons they teach us, we risk allowing harmful behaviors to continue to the detriment of our own integrity and well-being. Moreover, by holding firm to our values, we establish clear boundaries that protect and guide our interactions. This doesn't mean we should be inflexible or devoid of compassion, but rather that our compassion and desire to forgive should not lead us to accept behaviors that contradict our deepest principles. True wisdom lies in the ability to discern when compassion and a second chance serve the greater good, and when they merely expose us to more harm. 3. Some people do not know how to repent. Regret, a complex emotion reflecting acknowledgement of faults and the willingness to change, is essential for the healing and reconciliation process. When someone shows no capacity or willingness to sincerely repent, it signals a lack of self-awareness and commitment to change, fundamental aspects for any form of growth or personal development. Genuine regret goes beyond a simple apology. It involves a deep understanding of the impact of one's actions on others, coupled with tangible efforts to make significant behavioral changes. Without this understanding and action, an apology can become an empty, repetitive gesture, eventually meaningless, leading to a cycle of harmful behaviors without real intention of improvement. Someone's refusal or inability to repent can be due to various factors, including pride, selfishness, or even deeper personality traits such as narcissism or lack of empathy. These characteristics make it difficult, if not impossible, for the person to recognize their mistakes and take responsibility for them. In such cases, giving a second chance may not only fail to address the underlying issues, but could also validate destructive behaviors and allow them to continue without consequences. 4. Forgiveness is not reconciliation. Forgiveness is an act of internal release, a personal decision to let go of the weight of resentment or hurt towards someone who has caused us harm. It does not require the other person to change, apologize, or even know they have been forgiven. It's a gift to oneself, a step towards inner peace and emotional well-being. On the other hand, reconciliation is a bilateral process involving the restoration of a broken relationship. It requires effort, understanding, and changes from both parties involved. For genuine reconciliation, mutual commitment to change, understanding, and respect for each other's needs and boundaries is essential. It's a path that demands rebuilt trust, and often an agreement on how both sides can act differently in the future. It's crucial to differentiate between forgiving and reconciling. Forgiveness can be granted without the need to reintegrate the person into your life. There are situations where, despite forgiveness, reconciliation is not advisable or even possible, especially if the other party continues to demonstrate harmful, abusive, or treacherous behaviors. In these cases, maintaining distance is a form of self-protection and respect for one's boundaries. Choosing not to reconcile does not mean one has failed to forgive. It means recognizing that some relationships are unhealthy or irreparably damaged, and the best way to move forward is without the constant presence of the person who caused the harm. This decision honors the value of one's well-being and emotional health, establishing a safe space for healing and personal growth. 5. Chronic problems rarely disappear. Experience and observation reveal an uncomfortable truth. Chronic problems deeply rooted in a person's personality or behavioral patterns seldom disappear without significant intervention. These chronic issues can range from the inability to keep commitments, manipulative or abusive behaviors, to issues of reliability and mutual respect. They indicate deeper patterns often rooted in past experiences, traumas, or even an inability to recognize and work on one's own flaws. In this context, The repetition of harmful behaviors is not just a possibility but a likelihood, especially without recognition, genuine will, and effort to change. Choosing not to give a second chance in these circumstances is not an admission of a lack of faith in people's capacity to change, but rather a pragmatic acknowledgement that change is a difficult and often slow process. It requires not just the awareness and desire to change on the part of the person in question, but also a commitment to ongoing action to overcome these chronic patterns. Without these critical elements, the likelihood that the same problems will resurface in a relationship is high, potentially leading to more pain and disappointment. 6. Say no whenever necessary. This principle is based on the understanding that while forgiveness can be a vital part of personal growth and healing, it does not obligate reconciliation or the re-entry of a harmful person into your life. Saying no is therefore an acknowledgement that you value your peace, emotional safety, and well-being above the need to please others or adhere to societal expectations of giving a second chance. Saying no whenever necessary requires an honest assessment of the situations and behaviors that led to the need for an initial second chance. If the person in question has not shown genuine signs of change, understanding of the impact of their actions, or a real effort to repair the damage caused, then saying no is an appropriate and justified response. Moreover, this stance protects against the potential of being repeatedly harmed or exploited. Behavior patterns, especially those that are toxic or abusive, rarely change without a significant commitment to personal work and change. By saying no, you establish a clear boundary that not only communicates your refusal to tolerate such behavior, but also reinforces your dignity and self-esteem. 7. Personality is intrinsic to the person. Shaped by a combination of genetic factors, life experiences, and social interactions, a person's personality is relatively stable over time. This does not mean that people cannot change. They can and often do. However, profound and lasting changes in personality require a conscious effort, introspection, and often professional assistance. When assessing whether someone deserves a second chance, especially in cases of transgressions or harmful behaviors, it is crucial to consider the nature of that person's personality. If the negative behaviors are expressions of deeply rooted personality traits such as manipulative tendencies, selfishness, or lack of empathy, the likelihood of change without significant commitment to personal development is low. This recognition is not an excuse for fatalism or giving up on people prematurely, but rather an invitation to realistically assess a person's capacity for change and to protect oneself against unrealistic expectations. Expecting someone to change fundamental aspects of their personality without genuine effort on their part can lead to cycles of disappointment and pain. Moreover, recognizing personality as intrinsic does not mean denying a person's capacity for growth or evolution. People can and should strive for self-improvement. However, this process is often long, difficult, and non-linear. In contexts where a second chance implies significant risks to one's emotional, physical, or psychological well-being, understanding the intrinsic nature of personality can be a valuable guide in making informed decisions. 8. Remember the lessons from the past. Giving a second chance without seriously considering someone's past actions can be an act of hope, but it can also be a neglect of the lessons learned. Forgiveness is a virtue, but it should not be confused with forgetting or willful ignorance of warning signs. It is essential to assess whether the person in question has shown genuine remorse, understanding of the consequences of their actions, and tangible efforts to change. Past experiences teach us about boundaries, self-respect, and the value of maintaining healthy relationships. When someone repeatedly shows disregard for these principles, it may be wise to protect oneself instead of making room for more disappointments. This does not mean closing the door to forgiveness or the possibility of reconciliation in the future, but recognizing that trust must be rebuilt with actions, not just promises. 9. Do not be a slave to your impulses. Acting impulsively can lead us to overlook red flags and previous negative behavior patterns, putting us at risk of being hurt again. Instead of giving in to the immediate desire for reconciliation or fear of loneliness, it is important to take a moment to reflect on why the relationship was harmful in the past and whether those issues have been properly addressed. Furthermore, it is essential to recognize that forgiveness and reconciliation are distinct processes. You can forgive someone and free yourself from the weight of resentment without necessarily allowing that person to play the same role in your life. Staying firm in your decision requires a clear understanding of your boundaries and the value you place on your peace and well-being. Thus, when facing the question of whether or not to give a second chance, it is prudent to take a step back and assess the situation with a clear mind and calm heart. Allow yourself time to consider all the implications, and remember that sometimes the strongest and healthiest decision is to choose not to reopen doors that were closed for good reasons. Cultivating the strength to resist momentary impulses in favor of what is healthy and beneficial in the long term is a sign of emotional maturity and self-respect. 10. Nothing is ever guaranteed. Uncertainty is a constant in life, and this truth particularly extends to human relationships and the idea of giving second chances. The expectation that things will change for the better or that a second opportunity will ensure a different outcome is often unfounded. Accepting that nothing is ever guaranteed is crucial when considering whether or not someone deserves a new chance in any capacity. This understanding forces us to confront the reality that, regardless of the promises made or hopes nurtured, there are no certainties that past behavior patterns will not repeat. People may promise to change and even make significant efforts in that direction, but the possibility of relapsing into old habits or harmful actions remains. This is an especially important consideration in situations where trust has been significantly broken. Recognizing that nothing is guaranteed helps us to weigh decisions about second chances with more caution and realism. It involves assessing not just the promises of change, but also the risks involved and whether we are prepared to accept them. This does not mean living in a constant state of skepticism or refusing to forgive, but rather approaching reconciliation with a clear understanding of the possible consequences. This perception also highlights the importance of setting clear boundaries and conditions for a second chance if we decide to grant it. This involves communicating clear expectations and establishing consequences in case these expectations are not met. Such an approach not only protects the emotional well-being of the one offering the second chance, but also establishes a framework of accountability for the person receiving it. 11. Do not let your emotions hinder your reason. In an ideal world, emotions and reason would coexist harmoniously, guiding our decisions to balanced and fair outcomes. However, in reality, emotions can sometimes cloud our rational judgment, especially when it comes to giving second chances to those who do not deserve them. The heart tends to remember the good times, hope persists in change, and the desire to believe in the best of people can lead us to overlook lessons learned. Allowing emotions to completely dominate reason in these situations is risky. It can lead us to repeat the same mistakes, expecting different results. Stoic philosophy, with its emphasis on self-mastery and lucid perception of reality, teaches us the importance of balancing emotion and reason. It encourages us to recognize our emotions, but not to let them dictate our actions without careful consideration of the consequences. When it comes to deciding whether to give a second chance, it is crucial to pause and objectively assess the situation. This involves looking beyond how we feel about someone and considering their track record of actions, the likelihood of real change, and the potential impact of their actions on our life. Assess whether the person has demonstrated a genuine commitment to change, and if you are prepared to face the same issues again. This can help guide a more rational decision. Establishing healthy and clear boundaries is also a way to protect yourself. This does not mean closing the door to forgiveness or the possibility of reconciliation, but ensuring that such openings do not compromise your emotional or physical well-being. The decision not to give a second chance in this context is an act of self-care, not of bitterness. 12. You have a role in your own life. This means understanding that although we cannot control the actions of others, we have total control over how we choose to respond to those actions. This includes the decision to grant or deny second chances. The decision not to give a second chance to someone is not merely a passive reaction to that person's behavior. It is an active choice that reflects our values, boundaries, and respect for ourselves. By embracing our active role, we also recognize that our peace of mind and well-being are our responsibility. Allowing someone who has repeatedly harmed us back into our life can be seen as a neglect of the care we owe to ourselves. Stoic wisdom teaches us that serenity comes not from external approval or circumstances, but from internal mastery and living according to ethical principles. Furthermore, taking an active role in our life means making deliberate choices about whom we associate with and how those associations affect our personal journey. Choosing to distance ourselves from those who do not deserve a second chance is also choosing the quality of influences we allow into our personal sphere. Finally, this principle encourages us to reflect on our personal growth and how adversities and difficult relationships have shaped us. Instead of remaining victims of circumstances or the actions of others, we are invited to learn from these experiences, to strengthen our character, and to make decisions more aligned with who we aspire to be. Thank you for watching. For those of you who made it here, please comment Armored Wisdom. I'll leave another video here that you might like. See you soon.